Hello and welcome to this video about an introduction to percents. The learning target for this lesson is understanding what a percent is and how they relate to fractions and decimals. So let's address the question, what is a percent? Well, the word percent literally means out of 100. So if you take a look at per, that means out of, and then cent means 100. And so what percents are, they are a fraction out of 100. So our denominator is always going to be 100, and then we put in numbers up there. And because of that, a percent is sort of this bridge between fractions and decimals. And so let's say we have a fraction, and just for the sake of ease, we're going to call it A over B. And then over here we have decimals, which we'll write as A point B. And sort of the bridge between them is percentages, because percentages are a little bit of both. It is something that's written out of 100 in the denominator, but when you have something written out of 100, it's also really, really easy to then convert it to a decimal, or to switch decimals into percents. So, with that being said, let's talk about how to switch between decimals and percents. To switch from decimals to percents, it's all about moving the decimal point. Decimal point. Now the hard part is remembering which way we're going to have to go. So if we're going from a decimal to a percent, you're going to move it to the right. If we're going from a percent to a decimal, we're going to move it to the left. So let me show you some examples. Let's start off with a decimal. Let's say we have 0.45, and we want to convert this to a percent. Well, what we're going to do is we bump it over 2 spots, 1, 2. So 0.45 is equal to 45%. Now, let's do this with some more complicated decimals. Oops, let's erase that. There we go. All right, let's say we have 1.35. The process is the same. We're always going to bump it 2 spots, 1, 2. So this equals 13.5%. Now let's put a number out here. Let's say we had 2.5 and leave it at that. If we're going to convert that to a percent, we still take this decimal, we go 1, 2 spots. And there's nothing here right now, so what we're going to do is we're going to fill it in with a 0. And so that gives us 250%. Now let's go the other way. So here, again, when we go from a decimal to a percent, we go to the right 2 spots. And it's always going to be 2 spots. Now, let's go from a percent to a decimal. So we're going to go from a percent to a decimal. Let's say we have something like 75%. Well, right now, the decimal is not written, but it's implied to be at the end of the 5. So we're going to go 1, 2 to the left. So that's going to equal 0.75. If we have something a little more complicated, like let's just say we had 52.5%, again, we're going to move the decimal 2 spots to the left, 1, 2, and that is equal to 0.525. All right, let's do a couple more for good practice. Let's say we have something like 1.3%. Move it 2 spots still, 1, 2. Now the thing is, this is an empty space, so we'll backfill it with a 0, and we end up getting 0.013. All right, so we're always moving the decimal 2 spots, and sometimes we have to fill in zeros to kind of hold places. All right, and finally, let's go with 130%. Again, 2 spaces, 1, 2, and so that's going to be 1.3. So that's how we switch from decimals to percents and percents to decimals. Now, let's talk about switching between percents and fractions. And really, the best way we have to do it, there's 2 ways to do it. You have to go to decimals. That's just sort of how we're going to make it happen. Somehow you have to go to decimals. Or we have to sort of cheat and remember basic fractions. And so I want to jot down a few that we should be familiar with. And some of them you probably already are. So for example, 1/2 is equal to 50%. Number 2, 1/3 is equal to 33.3 repeating percent. Number 3, 1/4 is equal to 25%. Number 4, 1/5 is equal to 20%. Now we're going to jump the gun a little bit here. It'd be nice if you know what 1/6 and 1/7 are, but you don't necessarily need to know what they are. So we can go with jump over to 1/8, which is going to equal 12.5%. And then, let's see here, number 6, the sixth one we should know is 1/9, which is equal to 11.1 repeating percent. And finally, 1/10 is equal to 10%. Now these are the ones that you should just have committed to memory. And then here's the cool thing. If we know what 1/9 is, we can use that to figure out what 4/9 is. So if we want to know what 1/9 is, well, we know that 1/9 is 1.1% repeating. And in order to go from 1 to 4/9, we have to times by 4. So we'll just times this one by 4 to get 44.4 repeating percent. And so if you know what these, like what 1 out of whatever is, you can use that to figure out what the other versions of that fraction are as well. Okay, finally, let's talk about a big core idea with percents. So percents like to limit everything between 0 and 1 on a number line. Okay? And what we're just talking about is how far we're going on this number line. And so that's sort of what the percentage is getting at, is how far are we going on a number line between 0 and 1. And so the core idea I want you to take away from this, because we'll talk more about this idea of looking at it as like an area model a little bit later, is that if we have something that is less than 100%, that means you're talking about something smaller. If we're talking about something that's greater than 100%, we're talking about something that is larger than what we started off with. So for example, think about a quiz or a test. If you got a 70%, you didn't get all the questions correct. You got 110%, you got extra credit, meaning you got more points than there should have been on the test. So wanted to establish that idea before I leave you to do your homework or practice. But yeah, core idea, anything less than 100% is going to make it something smaller. Anything larger than 100% is going to be a larger value than the original number we're talking about. So good luck with your homework or practice, and let me know if you have any questions.